is no longer news that the global community is currently faced with an epidemic categorized as a health emergency of international concern. I'm talking about the novel coronavirus, now referred to as COVID-19. Since the first infection was diagnosed in the Chinese city of Wuhan in December 2019, COVID-19 has been spreading at a speed beyond the expectations of medical experts. Record shows that from the epicenter in China, coronavirus has spread to the Asian Pacific regions, Europe, North America, the Middle East, and lately Egypt in North Africa. The West African sub-region where Nigeria belongs is still secured from the virus for now. COVID-19 has recorded tens of thousands of cases, after which over 700 cases are shared by 25 countries. While the Chinese government has taken robust measures to curb the spread of the deadly virus, other regions and nations are equally on their toes to keep it away from getting to their shores. The efforts of the West African sub-region in this regard, under the auspices of the West African Health Organization, WAHO, is our focus on the policy track segment of this episode of Health Options. And like I said earlier, our nature scanner is a must-watch. Thanks for joining us on the program. Joining me in the studio now for us to take a look at the preparedness of the West African sub-region towards the prevention of coronavirus into the region is no other person than the Director General of the West African Health Organization, WAHO. By the way, he is a Nigerian, Professor Stanley Okolo. It is a pleasure to have you join us on Health Options, Prof.
Thank you so much, Rabi, and thank you for having me.
All right, very well. This is really not the best of moment for the global community, particularly China, talking about COVID-19 now. But before we even get to that, Nigerians will be interested, since we're having you on this program for the first time, I'm sure Nigerians will be interested in knowing what the West African Health Organization, WAHO, it's all about. What do you represent as an organization?
Okay, thank you so much. WAHO is part and institution of ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. It's an intergovernmental organization that was set up by the heads of states of the 15 member states that make up ECOWAS. Okay. So WAHO is the health institution. Incidentally, of the 5 regional economic communities in Africa, it's only the West Africa that has, in the West African community, that has a health institution, which is WAHO. So we have 15 countries, as you know. We have 8 francophone countries, we have 5 anglophone countries, and 2 lusophone countries. Okay. So the 2 lusophone countries being Cabo Verde, Cape Verde, as we know it in Nigeria, and Guinea-Bissau. Okay. And then the 5 anglophone being Nigeria, Ghana, Gambia, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. And then you have 8 francophone. So you from the west, Senegal, then you have Guinea, you have Cote d'Ivoire, you have Togo, Benin, then you have Niger, you have Mali, you have Burkina Faso. And all these make up ECOWAS, and West Africa Health Organization is the intergovernmental body. Okay, so what exactly does WAHO do? What role do you play? WAHO is charged with improving the health of the region on any issues of health that has a regional impact. And so we sort of bring the region together. We are the ones who champion and promote policies that are should be pursued by all governments in terms of the 15 countries. We're also the ones that are charged with protecting the health of the region. For example, we are now talking about coronavirus, which is in China, and we have been undertaking actions to make sure that the region as one has a regional approach. Not only that, but that as a region that we have the infrastructure, the personnel, and the capacity to deal with it if it comes. Okay, let me take you back to the era of the Ebola outbreak. Okay. I know, of course, WAHO probably had been in existence for as long as how many years now? Well, WAHO was actually declared about 30 years ago, but in terms of being in existence as an institution, it's only been in existence for about 16 years.
Okay, so I'm sure you played a major role during the outbreak of Ebola, because I want to use that as a peg.
Absolutely.
For what we're going to talk about
Absolutely.
on COVID-19 now.
Absolutely, WAHO did.
Okay.
Obviously, we, not just WAHO, but also the international community and West Africa, we are not as prepared for Ebola, as you know, that the response was slightly slow. But since then, a lot has happened, and the whole essence of preparedness and surveillance in the West African region is much stronger.
Okay, there is a different scenario now, because COVID-19 is there, and we know every region, it's for the regions it had not spread to. Those ones that have not been touched at the moment are really making efforts to keep it off their shores, which and that includes the West African sub-region.
Yes.
So what's countries under WAHO doing right now? What's your first step? What have you been able to do?
So what we have actually tried to do are things that we have started even before COVID-19 started. So one of the things that is really key in terms of protecting, particularly against epidemics, is strengthening the national public health institutions within the country. So in Nigeria, we have what we call the NCDC, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. We have similar in all 15 countries. And what WAHO does is to ensure that not only do we champion and promote the establishment of these, but making sure that they are established along international and agreed WHO. So they must have, for example, integrated aspects in terms of surveillance, because you have to continue having surveillance whether you have the episode or not. That's how, of course, it was picked up in China. Then we also have to have preparedness in terms of not only the laboratories. In WAHO, we set up 12 reference laboratories across the 15 countries, and not only did we set them up, we actually subspecialized them. So there are certain laboratories that are cohorted for certain viruses. Okay. Even before we had the coronavirus epidemic, we had the Noguchi laboratory in Ghana and the Pasteur Institute in Senegal designated for such viruses. As you know, coronavirus is just one of a group of viruses that are there. MERS and SARS are part of the same respiratory tract viruses.
Okay, you just rose from a meeting in Mali. What was the focus?
The focus was really to bring together the 15 countries to have an integrated approach. And the way we felt that was necessary was to ensure that the ministers of health of the 15 countries came to Mali as an emergency meeting, and we all discussed what is happening in individual countries. But of course, WAHO, and not only WAHO, Africa CDC, presented to them the technical and global aspects and all the things that we have done. And on the basis of that, they then started taking some decisions. Now, to reassure you, Nigeria CDC is one of the best CDCs that we have, not only in Africa, but of course, as we know, in the region, but actually it's functioning extremely well. But you know that the region's protection is as strong as the weakest link in that region, and that's why it's important that we did this. And so some of the things that started coming out were, what should be the strategy for people coming back from China? How should we, for example, where there are no reference laboratories or where there are no laboratories that can test, how should we support that? Now, of course, you know that it's a rapidly changing scene. So if I say to you that 3 weeks ago we had only the 2 laboratories, as I was talking about, that were designated, we have 5. So Nigeria now has up to 2 laboratories, in fact up to 3 that can test. We have Ghana, we have Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast to us, we have Sierra Leone, and we have Senegal. Now, by next week, we will have all our 15 countries able to test, because what we're doing at the same time as making sure that we're strengthening those that are there is that we're training more and more people. So next week we have put out a training for laboratory practitioners from all the 15 countries. If we have a suspected case at the moment, as we have had across about 7 countries, what we do is that we immediately put in the isolation measures, the management measures, but they take the samples and use a transport.
No. When you said about, you mentioned which 7 countries are you talking about?
Okay, so we've had case that is suspected.
Oh, suspected cases.
Of course.
Because
of course. So we've had suspected cases in 7 countries. And what we do is we take the sample and immediately transport it within our agreed protocol to any of those laboratories. But when we have all the countries that have their capacity built up in terms of testing, then of course they will be able to test. The next thing that the ministers then discussed is how to ensure we have a contingency stock. Because when you're talking about testing, you are talking about laboratory materials, reagents, and as you know, in China now, they are saying that they are getting depletion in face masks because of. So all these personal protective equipment are things that we are really looking at how we boost within the ECOWAS region.
So what you're saying now is that we have to stockpile all of that and be ready. Just, we're not envisaging, but anything can happen.
Yes, and that is part of the thing that WAHO is setting up to do. Did I agree that we should also develop a costed strategic regional plan so that would include supporting some countries that may not immediately have the means to develop huge quarantine facilities if required. I'm sure you well know that China built a hospital in 10 days. I don't think we can replicate that. Okay, so some countries may be strong enough and big enough to use schools, to use hospitals in terms of emptying them to quarantine, but some countries cannot have that. And WAHO is positioned based on this regional costed plan, which we are developing at the moment to support such countries. Our initial estimate, until of course we look at the full plan, our initial estimate is that we are looking at between $35 to $50 million, which we would expect not only national governments to support, but also partners and the private sector. Now, one of the things we have in Africa is that people often don't feel it is important to prepare. They wait until the epidemic arrives before you then start having people trying to contribute. We are really pleading with our private sector.
So prevention should be prioritized optimally.
Absolutely. Okay. And one of the things that also came out from the meeting in Bamako was how we upgrade and ensure that we have robust surveillance at all entry points. All entry points, not just airports, land borders, sea borders, and how we continue to do that.
You know, what's happening now keeps giving credence to the saying that diseases know no borders.
Absolutely.
Case has been confirmed in Egypt. What does that portend?
The professionals have had a lot of preparation. What, of course, we may not be fully prepared for is in terms of the means, the finances, in order to support this. Now, of course, the case in Egypt was confirmed whilst we were having our meeting on Friday in Egypt. And it just shows, as you said, to re-emphasize that disease knows no boundaries. And we are particularly happy with the way the global community has been supporting West Africa, but not just West Africa, also Africa, in terms of preparing for epidemics. There's a World Bank project called the Redice program, which is been going on for about 6 years now, and it is really robust, and it helps us in terms of all this training. We're talking about epidemiologists. We have about over 3,000 field epidemiologists across the region at the moment. We have about 400 that have been trained as advanced epidemiologists, and a lot of that, some of it are from the countries, but a lot of that is also through this World Bank project. In addition, we have had so many partners who are helping us. The German government, KfW, are helping us in terms of the laboratory capacity, helping us to build some of those, build capacity in some of those reference laboratories. And then not to talk about something like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which immediately this happened, gave $5 million to Africa CDC to help support all the countries through the regional economic communities. So there is a lot happening. And on Saturday, what we have started in West Africa, Africa is going to do. So the Africa Union has just called all health ministers and those of us who are responsible for regional to an emergency meeting in Addis on Saturday to discuss an African approach. And I think this is really, really important. The key is coordination, collaborating with each other, and communication, so that what happens in Sierra Leone, we already know. The other countries will know. Whatever happens in Nigeria, everybody will know.
There's synergy.
A synergy is so important. A synergy is so important. But as it is important, is also the fact that we continue to encourage and challenge, actually, the media to ensure that all those wide, off-the-scale stories, fake stories actually, in social media, that we must, as much as possible, dampen that. That citizens should take care of their own.
Talking about social media now and stories emanating from there, a case in point is the one about the Cameroonian who, got infected but treated, and there was this boast about the fact that the African gene is immune to coronavirus. It's in Africa, and even someone out there said, not Africa, it's, quote and unquote, that we're talking about the real black man now. How true is that, or is just out of ignorance?
I think it's out of ignorance. Let's just put it to bed. Today, over 1,700 deaths from coronavirus, and only about 4 or 5 of them have been outside China. So, to be clear, there have been deaths outside China, but what I'm trying to say is that people do recover from coronavirus. Once we pick it early, once we support the person, because at the moment, most of the treatments are really experimental. But the most important thing is the isolation, the support to breathing, the making sure, because it's a virus. It takes time.
So caution is the word.
Caution and personal hygiene. Absolutely important. There may not be somebody who's had the primary contact, but they may have had a secondary contact with somebody who's had the primary contact. And so they say, I've never been to China. But of course, they have been to the market where somebody's been to China was there. And so it's important to remember that.
On a final note now, the fact that we had you here, I want to ask you this question on health budget for health for countries. Are you okay with what we see?
Okay. I'm sure you know, and your viewers also know, about the 2001 Abuja Declaration.
Definitely.
And the Abuja Declaration of the heads of state of African government is the one that mandated that we should move to 15% of the health budget. Okay. Now, we were going towards that. And there are so many other pressures and so many platforms that were put in place to help us get there. So, for example, you know about the Global Financing Facility, which is where if you have a particular budget that is geared towards women and children, then you will get some matching or even more grant from the international community, IDA. There is a scorecard. Africa's Union of Africa CDC does that, and we do that in WAHO. What we are seeing is that the investment that was going steadily up is leveling out, and we risk losing it. Do you know why?
Why?
Because of insecurity. We have had a lot of insecurity in the West African region, in the Sahel, and if a country like Mali has to devote 25% of their budget to security, how much more have they got to devote to health, to social issues? And that is why it's really critical that we start having a conversation with the international community. I personally feel that really the international development assistance, and based on what we have today in a lot of the West African countries, we should start talking about debt relief again. Because a lot of these countries do have international debt. They still have to pay their international debt. But at the same time, they pay 25% in security. That is what they budget. Above that. So I think it's time for us to start looking at whether we can hypothecate all or a great proportion of international debt of countries with security issues to health and social issues. Hypothecate it. Women, children, education, because the benefits will be tremendous.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Stanley Okolo, Director General, West African Health Organization, for coming on Health Options. We look forward to having you again.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
It's now time time to bring you Nature's Corner, where you will get to know about, apart from moringa being an immune booster, other wonderful things about the plant.
Yes, when we talk of health benefit of moringa, it can never be overemphasized, because that is the plant that God have blessed that accommodate and take all the nutrients that belongs to other plants and crops and vegetables. It have all hold it together as in a single plant. So we call it life in a tree, or supermarket in a tree. But when you go to the National Veterinary Research Institute in VOM, I think from what comes out of that research institute as of 2010 and 2011, not to talk of the one that I've done personally, you can never compare an animal or a bird that have taken this synthetic feed production with the one that have taken moringa. Practically on ground, when you put the two of them together, you will discover that the other one that you are taking that have eaten some of this feed, those that have eaten moringa, maybe processed food, you will discover that their own meat and their blood analysis have superseded almost 150% over the one that have taken synthetic feed. It detoxifies whatsoever that is coming to its own leaves. It's a detoxifier on its own. It's a fertilizer on its own to other plants. So the waste product of moringa on its own is a fertilizer that boosts some of these grains and the rest of them, vegetables and the rest of it. So that is why we are encouraging our farmers, encouraging the poor people or downtrodden there in the villages and the rest of it. Plant this tree. In the cost of planting, you are also selling and you are also eating. In such, it covers up most of this, it balances up those nutrients that are lacking in some of these grains, some of these vegetables and the rest of it that are causing most of these health problems that we are having. So, you know, moringa detoxify is a detoxifier on its own. It detoxifies any other thing that is maybe so some of those side effects of these fertilizers and the rest of it. So by such doing, we discover that we will have a healthy living, and people, you discover that people, when we talk of health challenges, we discover we'll cut it off totally. You know, some of this outbreak of diseases and the rest of it, every time you hear outbreak of diseases and so many problems, once you are taking moringa, it boosts your immune system. Nigerians have the best weather and God have blessed us. Manpower, the youth are there to work, because what is coming out on a monthly basis have solved most of the things that will be coming up from the office. If you go to Taraba State, each family, each house that you stepped in Taraba State, you have from each house, you have about 10-20 trees planted in their house as a garden or around their fence. I am calling on all Nigerians, both civil servants, both retirees. We are giving you all this input. We are not just giving you input, we are giving you the seedlings, so that by this rainy season, you are planting it. After 4 months, you start harvesting. And once you start harvesting, every month you are harvesting with what they are giving you. That takes away most of this unemployment crisis and crimes that have been coming as a result of maybe lack of work. So we are calling on all Nigerians, both retirees and civil servants, you plant your future today.
This is where we end this episode of Health Options. A quick reminder that you can go to our YouTube channel to watch the upload of these and other episodes of the program. Email us for your comments and contributions at healthoptions@nta.gov.ng. My name is Rabi Abdullah. Goodbye.
This is NTA International.
If you travel around the world, you will find out that there is no place like Nigeria. Beautiful, peaceful, very warm and friendly climate all year round. Largest concentration of black people in the world. Hospitable, vibrant and happy people. There is no place like Nigeria. A land of opportunities. The biggest window in the world of business and investments. Extremely rich in multicultural diversity. There is no place like Nigeria.
Nigeria, good people, great nation.
My name's Mr. Muftau Abiodun Balogun. We started this business 4 years ago, and this is the production outlet where we do about 4,000 to 5,000 birds per day. With the closure of the border recently, we've been experiencing massive surge in demand. Our sales per day now is going to be between 15 to 20,000 birds. We needed to expand all avenues because of the multiplier effect it's creating. And the most interesting thing about this closure is that many of my farmers today are farmers we recruited recently, and they are young graduates. What the government is doing will lead us right. And I can tell you, if the government sustains this thing, sky will not even be our limit.
This is Mambila Plateau, a place in Nigeria endowed with enormous natural resources. The topography, the undulating plains, and exciting rock formations. Waterfalls and waterways are second to none. Said to be the highest point in Nigeria, Mambila Plateau is the home of the largest hydroelectricity project in West Africa. Mambila Plateau, a virgin beauty waiting to be exploited for tourism.
Many thanks for joining us on the news update. I'm Abdul Malik Adio. 8 Boko Haram fighters, along with 14 family members, have surrendered to troops of 152 Task Force Battalion at Banki Town in Bama local government area of Borno State. A statement by the Nigerian Army Operations Media Coordinator, Colonel Aminu Ilyasu, says during a preliminary interrogation, the surrendered terrorists disclosed that their leadership have been in disarray for the past 4 months. In another development, troops on clearance operations at Gumam Balai and Guza Mala local government area of Borno State rescued 126 Boko Haram captives. Colonel Aminu Ilyasu notes that troops in Kaduna, Katsina, Niger, Zamfara and Calabar State have intercepted criminals, kidnapped victims liberated, weapons and stolen items recovered. Now, the federal government has approved about 32 billion naira for the enhancement of the nation's critical road infrastructure, as well as aviation and water resources sector for the growth and development of the economy. The decision was at the week's meeting of the Federal Executive Council, presided over by President Muhammadu Buhari.
First is Bale Kudula to Niger Republic border road in Sokoto, 9.576 billion naira. The second one is for Kunya, Kanya Baba Babura to Niger Republic border, phase 2, which is in Jigawa State, 19,763.567 million.
Now, structural deficiencies of the Nigerian police force, as identified by Parliament, are as a result of the current act in use, which dates far back to the era of colonial rule, that is, 1943 to be precise. This informs the decision of the House of Representatives to repeal the Act and reenact a bill which it believes will make the force more efficient, accountable, and transparent in line with best global practice. And that concludes the update. Many thanks for watching. I'm Abdul Malik Adio. Another update is at 1 p.m.